It's Friday. You know what that means? Welcome to Planet Earth. History, dinosaurs, football. What else is there to talk about, right? That's right. You don't have to answer that question. Hey, welcome to Friday. We made it, but we knew we were going to make it the whole time, right? Just answer yes and just keep on moving. Hey, we're going to talk about China today. Yeah, China is clearly a rising superpower. Whether or not they surpass the United States remains to be seen. We'll see how it goes. But I thought you should like to know kind of why China operates the way it does. See, China is very isolated from the rest of the world, always has been. China has usually been on top of the international pile looking down at the rest of the world, usually justified in doing so. In the 1400s, right after they've overthrown the Mongols, a brief time when they weren't on top, the Chinese had sailing ships that dwarfed anything you could see in Europe. Look there at the left. We got a Chinese treasure ship which is easily 4 times as big as the Santa Maria. Long before Christopher Columbus even thought about going to the West, or even before he was born, the Chinese had been sailing from their home ports all the way to East Africa. They even made it up the Red Sea. And even long before that, man, almost 1400s before then, they had created the Silk Road and had basically walked all the way to the edge of the Roman Empire. Took a look around, said nothing really to be gained, and they left, right? They did call Rome the treasure land, but it's far away and they can come to you instead of you going to them. It's a lot easier. But, we have grown up in an era where China has not been on top of the pile. And that's kind of the exception rather than the rule, because most of the time China has been the preeminent nation in like all respects, naval technology or just general technology. Gunpowder, they had it long before anyone else. But, the Europeans took it to a whole different level. Naval technology they were ahead, then the Europeans took it to a whole different level. How did that happen? Because of China's isolation, didn't really have to compete with anybody other than the Mongols overthrowing the country there for a century. China has been its own country, and like I said, they look down their nose at the rest of the world. But that isolation kind of worked against them because if it's not broke, don't fix it. And gunpowder and muskets are great to use against roving tribes in Siberia and an occasional war with Vietnam, because Vietnam was never going to conquer China as hard as they try, and it's not going to happen. So there's really no need to improve on anything. Whereas the Europeans, France, Britain, Germany, Spain, Portugal, Russia, what have you, Austria, Prussia, they're always fighting against each other. So they're always trying to improve their technology so they can beat the other guy. And that's what's going to happen. That's why by the 19th century, or even a little bit earlier, 18th century, European technology has shot past Chinese technology, and now they have better boats, and they are coming to China. The Chinese boats at that time were ships, treasure ships, were so advanced they might have even come to America. This is a little bit controversial, but if you can make it all the way to Africa, why not come to America? And as you can see by the currents over here, yeah, North Pacific Current, once you get past Japan, boom, there you are. You're going to go on the North Pacific Current. It takes you to California and got a current taking you back, the North Equatorial one. Now, if they actually did this or not, we're not really sure. Some people claim they found Chinese anchors off the coast of California. Chinese anchors are round with a hole in the middle, and you put a chain in it. That's how they like to make their anchors at that time. They said they found some like that. Maybe, maybe not. The whole thing is still rather speculative, but it's certainly within the realm of possibility, man. You can't discount it completely. Now, the reason China acts the way it does in 2023 is because of what they had to suffer through, the century of humiliation, roughly 1830 to about 1950. It's a little bit more than a century, but you get the point. Remember what I told you? China's usually on top of the pile looking down at the rest of the world. The Chinese emperor regards everyone else as some kind of a tributary. Even when the Europeans showed up to trade, made them bow and all this kind of stuff. Yeah, the Europeans played along, and after a while, the Chinese are doing the bowing. And they're going to basically slice China up like a piece of pizza. The Europeans are going to basically conquer all of Africa. The British already own India. They didn't really try to conquer or carve up China in a formal sense. They have what they call zone. They have spheres of influence. So the French are down there near Vietnam. The British have Hong Kong, and some other people, the Russians have Manchuria. They don't own it. It belongs nominally to China because it's easier to let a puppet government run it. But it's like 10% of the money goes to that European power. And as another humiliation, Japan shows up. So Japan, as you know, was stuck in the Middle Ages in 1853 when Admiral Perry came up and threatened to blast them with cannons as they trade. The first thing the Japanese did was buy rifles and cannons. And less than a century later, they kicked the United States right in the teeth at Pearl Harbor with carrier battle groups and planes that are better than anything else in the world. So whereas China was declining and suffering the whole time, Japan becomes a rising power who can fight toe-to-toe with the Europeans. China, on the other hand, despite more people, can't really do it. We already mentioned how China gets torn to pieces, man. The Russians, the French, the Germans, even Austria got in on this thing. The United States was a little bit late on it because, we didn't become a superpower for a while, that Civil War thing and settling the West. The United States never had an actual sphere of influence, but they had the open door policy. They took over the Philippines because it was close by. And they felt they could trade anywhere regardless of the sphere of influence. Not everybody felt that way, but nobody seemed to ask the Chinese about it. So China gets ripped to pieces by everybody, including even the Japanese. Insult to injury. Asian country next door rockets its way into modern times and basically historical blink of the eye. Here's Qin China in the 19th century. Now, it's a big country, pretty unified, but it's not very strong. And you can see all the arrows pointing in at it from every kind of direction. The map might say China and the calendar might say it's the 19th century, but as far as they know, they don't even own most of their own country. And, well, let's face it, pal, it's not 1500 anymore, right? You got to change with the times. That's just the way it is, man. Things change. History does not stand still. And the Chinese, somewhere along the way, forgot about it. The Russians pushing down from the north because they're actually next door physically. Japan is coming in there from the front door. We got the British and even the Dutch landing on ports, calling them treaty ports. How did this happen to China? How could such a powerful country suddenly just become prostate to all these Europeans that are located very far away, including the Russians, got to come through Siberia? Well, it all started really in the 1830s with opium. Yep. Opium had been coming into China by way of India. Sometimes over the Himalayas, sometimes they come around the Himalayas, usually through the ports of Canton and Hong Kong. The British own it. Well, they don't own it yet, but they're pretty much running things out of there. And the Chinese government, you see what opium and drugs do to another country, they decided it was time to outlaw it. Yeah, so the French and British were basically drug dealers. Well, the British decided they're going to make China take this stuff, and we've got the Opium Wars, first and second one. Britain and France teaming up against China. If you just take a look at that picture there on the left, yeah, Chinese aren't particularly ready for this yet, right? The British have their muskets, but they're also starting to get repeating rifles. They're better organized. The Chinese haven't fought a real war in a long time. They've got even older muskets, a few swords. It's not going to work out too well. It's the Indiana Jones scene. So they fight a couple times and they lose. The British take over Hong Kong, so now they're grabbing Chinese territory. The French have their own treaty ports and extraterritoriality, meaning they own certain districts in Chinese cities. They can trade, doing basically whatever they want. There's really nothing the Chinese can do. Like I said, they set up the sphere of influence. So, the great powerful Chinese empire has been forced down to its knees in 2 quick fights. Oh, how about this? The Sino-Japanese War. Then all of a sudden, the Chinese get in on this thing. The Japanese get on this thing. Fellow Asians right across the way. They have, in 1850, they were stuck in the Middle Ages, and suddenly they rise up in 1894 to attack the Chinese. Right? China's the declining power. Japan is the rising power. And, the Chinese are already weakened too. Aside from the Opium Wars, you had the Taiping Rebellion, a quick war with Russia. Taiping Rebellion was kind of interesting. A lot of Christian uprising in China, which was kind of strange. The Chinese government put it down, but 30 million people got killed, maybe even more than that. Might have been more people dying of that than the Second World War. The Russians grabbed some territory up there on top of Manchuria, and they're thinking about some more stuff along the way. And then boom, here comes Japan. They're going to attack China, and they're going to win pretty big. And they grab Korea away from China. Korea is kind of the bridge into the rest of Asia. So now instead of just the Russians looking at Manchuria, here comes China, and China's got an actual bridge to get there. Whereas the Russians got to come across the Trans-Siberian Railroad. But if you're Chinese, it's bad news looking at it either way. Well, since the Chinese government can't apparently stop these foreign invasions or internal rebellions, the people of China decide to take things into their own hands. And we've got the Boxer Rebellion, which is this huge uprising by the people of China against the foreign devils, they called them, and even their own government. And as you can see by the picture on the left, it gets pretty nasty. They've killed the nun there. They're torturing a monk. They got somebody's head up on a pike, and that's not good. They don't have a lot of weapons, but there's a lot of them. I mean, at that time, 900 million people. Yeah, good luck trying to stop that. It's like a tidal wave. But the Western powers, the 9-nation alliance, the United States, Japan, Russia, Britain, Austria, Italy, everybody's involved in this thing. They have to go in to get their people out, and you got the massive battle of Beijing and a huge siege at the consulates and everything. And the Chinese have the numbers, the Westerners have the machine guns and repeating rifles, so they manage to hold them off. So they end up defeating China, and here come more concessions and more humiliation heaped on China. So it's not looking good for China at the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th, not looking so good either. That picture there on the right, it's always one of my favorite ones too. It's just kind of strange to see American soldiers right there trying to storm a Chinese fortress. I mean, who would have ever thought that was going to happen a century earlier when they couldn't even conquer Toronto, Well, they seem to stagger along, and they actually create, the empire is overthrown in 1912. They got something that looks like a democracy there, the Kuomintang government. And it's trying to hold it together, but, it's not really working. And then things get worse. And now you have a communist uprising in 1927, but even worse is Japanese aggression. See there in Korea? They've decided they're going after Manchuria. 1932 is a brief war. They grab a lot of Manchuria. 1937, the Japanese start another war. They grab the rest of Manchuria into China. They go. How much do they want to conquer? They're going to keep going as far as they can. They take about half the country. So, not bad for a small country like Japan, but the typical Axis power problem of trying to fight everybody. The Japanese are going to be pinned in China, going to attack the United States. At the very back end of the war, the Russians come in. Their buddy Germany has the same problem, trying to fight everybody. When the Japanese are in China, they do some really bad things. A lot of massacres, the rape of Nanking, things of that nature. And the Japanese had the audacity to call themselves the light of Asia. They were yelling, Asia for Asians. We're going to chase out the Europeans. And nope, you just replaced Europeans with Japanese, and the Japanese were just as bad, in some cases, even worse. But eventually the Japanese are going to lose. Doesn't mean China wins, though. No, because like I said, they're in the middle of a civil war since 1927. They're on the left is Shai King Shak of nationalist China, the quote-unquote government of China. There on the left is Mao Zedong, the communist rebel fighting in 1927. The Japanese show up, so they actually, decide to fight alongside each other against the Japanese. You would have thought that led to some kind of reconciliation with the great victory in 1945, but nope. They're back at it again. And in 1949, the communists are going to win. The nationalists retreat to Taiwan. That is why Taiwan is Taiwan and China is China. They regard Taiwan as the renegade province, and part of that century of humiliation, they want it back. Taiwan, they're thinking about something else, and it doesn't involve China. To be continued. It might get pretty bad. And then even though China has been through so much up to this point, and they just finished their long drawn-out civil war and war to Japanese by 1949, they have no problem plunging into Korea in 1950 to defend their communist brethren North Korea against the United States. They go head first into it. They start driving the Americans back at first, and the Americans hit back with machine guns and napalm and airstrikes and everything. And it's a war that goes back and forth. But at the end of the day, the United States saves South Korea, so they call it a win on points. But China, they saved North Korea, so they consider it a win on points too. And say what you will, they fought the United States to a standstill. At the end of the day, it's an unsatisfying draw for everybody involved. The Chinese pushed the Americans back. The Americans pushed the Chinese back. At the end of the day, everything kind of stood where it started in the beginning, though South Korea got a little extra land. You can see it here, the arrows going back and forth, man. Both sides pushed each other around quite a bit. Don't think anyone's looking for a rematch, but I don't know. It could still happen, and that was in 1950, so, almost 80 years ago. People forget about what really happened. So we'll just see how it goes. Now let's go even further back, man. Let's go way before Korea, long before even humanity. We're going to talk about Dinosuchus. Yes, that's Greek for terrible crocodile. It seems like a good name. You can tell by the skull it's a crocodile. You don't really know how big this thing is in that picture, do you? Now, let me give you a hint. How about that? Yep, almost 30 feet long, maybe a little bit longer compared to a 6-foot individual. Yeah, if you want to go metric, fine. 1.8 tall meter person and, 30 meters long. This is a very big animal. All right, it looks like a giant crocodile. That's basically what it is. And this thing basically, I'm not going to say it ruled the Cretaceous, but it had its own little niche and nobody went in there, including even T-Rex thought twice about heading into the home of Dinosuchus here. Dinosuchus' home, by the way, is the Western Interior Seaway. It's kind of a North American thing. Some people claim they find fossils of Dinosuchus over in Europe, but it's unconfirmed. But we do know it lived over here in North America, the Western Interior Seaway. And that's where it liked to hang out. It liked to hang out in estuaries where the river comes into the sea, so you got that mix of salt water and fresh water. Dinosuchus ate mostly fish and turtles. Okay, no big surprise, easy to swim and gulp down. But its menu was somewhat varied, as you can imagine, with something that big. And every now and again, it decides to eat something a little bigger. Yeah, this thing could eat duck-billed dinosaurs. It's that big. They've actually found the remains of a hadrosaur with Dinosuchus teeth stuck in its neck. So yeah, it tells you that it went for the throat, and like its crocodile descendants today, it's probably an ambush predator. So it lives near the edge of the water, and boom. Now here's something you might not have known about alligators and crocodiles, but they don't actually have to live in the water. They can live outside the water. It's not a problem for them. They just prefer the water because it's easier. Right, just like humans. It's easier. So they hang out in the water and they play in the water and they swim and float around in the water. And it's easier to ambush things jumping out of the, out of the water. Things don't see it until it comes up. Plus, the prey has to come to the water at some point. So it's a lot easier than wandering on land. Sooner or later, the food will come to you. And Dinosuchus, man, is a considerable predator. It goes after big things, little things, eats whatever it wants. And yes, it will fight anybody, including T-Rex. Now, it's never been actually confirmed. We've never found any T-Rex bones with Dinosuchus bones in it, or any Dinosuchus bones with T-Rex teeth in it. But these guys must have come into conflict with each other at some point. All right, now who won this conflict? Who knows? It can go either way. But we do know one thing. Sometimes discretion might be the better part of valor. The Dinosuchus, as far as we know, first appeared 82 million years ago, and it died out around 73 million years ago. Look at that, 73 million years ago. When's the asteroid? Some people say 65, some people say 68, other people say 70. I do know one thing, right? 73 ain't 70. All right, it didn't get to the extinction. Didn't get wiped out by the extinction. Had a good run, but it didn't, apparently T-Rex was around longer than that thing was. So I got a feeling, the Dinosuchus might have won a battle now and again, but T-Rex won the war. Discretion, better part of valor. Hang out in the water, eat some fish, eat some turtles, right? Don't fight with the king of the land. They've made movies about Dinosuchus. Here's one that was allegedly about him called Dino Croc. It's very terrible. It's very bad. And that's not Dinosuchus. It didn't walk on two legs. You can just tell by looking at the thing. So they called it Dino Croc. If you want to see a movie that's something resembling Dinosuchus as its appearance and how it acts and everything else, hey, I recommend Lake Placid, the first one, not the second, third, and the 15 sequels they have to it. Just watch the first one, and that's kind of how Dinosuchus would look and act and basically live. Other things don't live, but Dinosuchus comes out of it until the very end because, it's a monster movie. Monster movies always end, right? The creature gets it at the end, but that's a pretty good ride. And it also hints at their baby ones floating around. So, it's not completely over. That's why they left it open to the sequel, and the sequel to that, and the sequel behind that, and the sequel behind that. And you know how that goes too. It never ends. Now, speaking of things that never end, Pittsburgh versus Cleveland. That was a pretty good game. Steelers win it 26-22. They came out, and the first thing I was wondering is, what is Cleveland wearing, man? I mean, history guys like us, man, we take a look at that. And yeah, I'm not a big fan of throwback uniforms. You should be happy about the era you live in and make your era something other people talk about. But that was kind of interesting. That's their uniform from 1946. That's the original Cleveland Browns uniform. Didn't have the helmets back then, so they kind of went with close enough sort of thing. So they go up against the Steelers, and the Steelers walk away with a very much needed 26-22 victory. I was worried about this game because the Browns were coming in, off a rare opening day victory and looking really good, and the Steelers did not look very good against San Francisco. But this game, both teams had their problems. The Browns had more problems because, they lost. But Pittsburgh, we're not saying a Super Bowl contender quite yet. It's a long season. It may still unveil something else. But, I saw some definite weaknesses in this game. This is what everybody's going to remember. Yeah, there's Nick Chubb and his knee turning in a direction it's not supposed to go. That's pretty bad. Back in 2018, Alex Smith of the Redskins had an injury similar to that. He came back, rehabbed. Spent 2019 rehab, played a little bit in 2020, retired. Further back in the dark ages, Joe Theismann, same thing happened to him again in Washington with the Redskins. His knee got completely destroyed. Legal hit, everything clean, just, it's the risk you play, that's the risk you take playing this game, That's why you got helmets and pads. And, I'm a diehard Steeler fan, yins are all the way, but, I do hope he recovers. If he's lucky, he's just out this year. But I'll be honest with you, between you, me, and everyone else, that's a career ender, man. I don't know if he's coming back from that one. Some people say the McGay injury of 2002, maybe, but that just doesn't look good, man. That knee will never be the same. He'll walk again. Don't worry about that. But I don't know about playing football and the kind of stress that game puts on your knees. Now, Cleveland had all kinds of other problems. Nick Chubb, say what you will, is a good running back, and he does his best. Their quarterback, Deshaun Watson, man, you got an attitude problem. You better get that thing under control fast. There he is on the picture there on the left. He's, got his hand wrapped around the face mask, so there's 15 yards. Thank you. There's another play where he got his hand around somebody's face mask, went colliding out of bounds at the Steeler sideline, tried to start a fight, which is not a good idea because you're on the other team's sideline, outnumbered like 50-1. He shoved the ref. That should have gotten thrown out of the game. They said it didn't rise to the level of a foul. You don't touch the ref. End of story. Then later on, he fumbled. That's the one that T.J. Watt picked up and ran in for the winning touchdown. So, Deshaun Watson, get it together, man. All right? You've got that huge contract. Team's 1-1. So, this season's still early. You got time to turn this around. But, see, people see things like this. People notice. They'll get under your skin. You get mad. You lose concentration. Bam, you lose the game. All right, enough about the great victory over Cleveland. Now it's time to talk about the next game coming up there. Going to Vegas for the first time. Steelers heading over to Vegas against the Raiders. This should be a pretty interesting one because both teams really don't look all that good or bad. They're just kind of there, both 1-1. Raiders have some serious weaknesses. One is their quarterback, Jimmy Garoppolo here. He's basically, what do I say? He's basically vanilla. I mean, he's not good. He's not bad. He's just kind of there. Doesn't really seem to inspire his teammates very much. You know, I mean, he's an okay quarterback. There's a lot of worse ones you can get. But at the end of the day, I don't know. He just looks like he's just sort of there, showing up to do the job. And you can see everybody sees nobody around him. Everyone's looking away from him. Yeah, I don't know. He's got to work on the leadership thing here, right? Maybe watch Band of Brothers a couple times or something. And then their defense isn't very good. As you can see by that picture with the 49ers. I just thought it was a really cool picture. The problem with the Raider defense is that last week they got completely destroyed by the Buffalo Bills 38-10 and could not stop anything. They started the year with an exciting 1-point victory over Denver, and then they get destroyed by Buffalo. So it's kind of hard to tell what this team is all about. Their running game was absolutely terrible in Buffalo. Now they get destroyed 38-10. They ran for a whopping total of -2 yards. Yeah, -2 on the ground game. If you can't run, you got to throw it on every down. If they know you're going to throw it, they're going to sit back and wait for you, man. If they take away your passing game, they load up the front. So you got to be able to pass and throw. Maybe emphasize the run a little bit more, but you got to be able to do both. But in all of this weakness I'm talking about, all these Raider weaknesses, remember, they did win a game already. And sometimes when you look in a whole cloud of weaknesses, you see something out there lurking. And I think that guy lurking is number 13. That's their receiver, a guy named Renfro over there. There's been a lot of talk about how he hasn't been utilized. I think they're going to try going deep to him early, get the Steelers to back off the line. That way the Raiders' anemic running game might have some room and have a chance to gain some traction. So we're going to see how that works out. Just kind of keep an eye on that situation. Now, Pittsburgh has problems on offense, too. We saw that. They didn't move the ball very well. And twice, the defense bailed them out, especially there at the end. They did have that really nice strike there from Pickett to Pickens. That was really cool, almost 70 yards. So the potential is there. They're still working on it. Still a pretty young team. But once again, you got to utilize your running game. Right? There's Najee Harris there jumping over a Raider from the last time they played. He jumps over a lot of people. You notice that? A lot of pictures of that going on. Use this guy, man. I mean, there we are. Might be a little throwback here. Emphasize the run, but hey, if it works, it works. You pound the enemy's defensive line into jelly, and you can do anything. Now, Pickett's over here. He had sort of a so-so game, but they did get the win. He's still new. Come on, Pittsburgh, get him a break. Remember what Bradshaw was like. Problem is, everyone's spoiled because of Roethlisberger's immediate success, but kind of went downhill at the end. But Pickett, he's coming along. Might be a little while. It's just not just add water. You got to work together. And then here's J.J. Watt, the MVP of that game. He set the Steeler record for all-time sacks. He picked up not one but two fumbles, and that second fumble, he picked it up and ran into the end zone for the winning touchdown. So J.J. Watt, offense, defense, anything else you might need. You need to sack a quarterback, he's the guy to call. You need to scoop up a ball, run into the end zone for a touchdown, J.J. Watt's your guy. Want to make sure the concession stand is running at full strength. He's your guy too. I bet he can pick it up. Just give him a chance, and you'll see the sales rise. Now, it's going to be a tough game against Oakland. Oakland needs to win. Pittsburgh needs to win. Both teams are 1-1, so it's kind of hard to really get a read on either team. But we're going to learn a lot in Game 3. So I say it's a long season, but we're already 2 in. So time to win some games, build up some momentum. And, hey, if you play your cards right, might end up winning the Super Bowl in Vegas in February. Might be the first of 2 trips. Maybe you see the Raiders in the playoffs, be first of 3. Yep, if you can win all 3, Vegas is home from home. And most importantly, you get that trophy. All righty, guys, it's been fun. It's been real. I'm running off to do probably nothing terribly important because it's Friday. You guys have a great weekend. I'll see you next week. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Go Steelers. Be careful when you're near the water. Don't know what's lurking around in there. And, be nice to any Chinese diplomats you find. Have a great day, and I'll talk to you later. Das vidanya.